Morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll begin with chapter 1, verse 2. So God gives Moshe at the beginning of Sefer Bamidbar the instruction, Se'u es rosh kol hadas b'nei Yisrael u'mishpachosam leveis avosam. Let's translate Se'u as count, though Se'u is an interesting word. Se'u literally means to lift. The head of all of the congregation of Israel by their families and by their extended families, Mispar Shemos by the number of names, Kol Zachar L'Gugulosam, every male by their head. Verse 3, Miben Ashim Shana V'Mala Kayotzei Tzava B'Yisrael, from 20 and up, all those who go out to the legions in Israel, Tifketu Osam L'Tzivosam, you should count them by their legions, Atav Aaron. You and Aaron. There's a few obvious questions that we can pose on these psukim. One is, why should there even be a count taken at this point? What's even the purpose of a count? Another is, what, if anything, is the significance of that verb at the beginning of verse 2, se'u, which we said means counting, but it seems to be an interesting way to say counting. Why only 20 and up? Why only 20 and up? So it seems the Torah gives us the reason for that. Kol yotzei tzava b'Yisrael. Is that a military thing? That, of course, could connect to why we're talking about men. In other words, if it's a military thing, we would understand why it'd be males 20 and up. Let's start with the Ramban. Ramban on Pasuk Gimel. Kol yotzei tzava b'Yisrael, all those who go out to the legions in Israel. Magid shein yotzei latzava pachos miben esrim. So we learn from here that you don't go out to war younger than 20. Se'u es rosh kol hadas b'nei Yisrael. So he starts off by citing Rashi, who sees this as being a military matter, and that it's a normal thing, like you would say to a general, pick up that fellow's head. It's sort of like counting them for battle. The efshar shiat hambazeh bavur she'inenu chazak l'mulchama pachos me'esrim. It could be that younger than the age of 20, person's not strong for war. It could be that they're not considered old enough to go to battle younger than 20. It's interesting. It was actually this past week's parak of Pirkei Avos that when a person is 20 years old, that it's a good time for them to chase. So that implies that there's a certain unique ability that comes at 20. Ramban says it might have nothing to do with the military. This is clearly not a message sponsored by the Jewish war veterans, but it might have nothing to do with the military. And it could be that the language of Kol Yotzei Tzava, it means people who are of the age to come out and be part of the community, part of the congregation. When there's a national announcement, you wouldn't have the kids come out. So it has to be, if there's an announcement, we want to convey something to everybody, it would be people of a certain age. So 20 is that age. The Ramban says that when people get together, it's called, on a national level, it's called Sava. We have later on, I guess, that there's a language of to be in the legion in the service of the tent of meeting. That doesn't mean that people are sitting there with their guns standing by the Ol Moed. It means that they're there to serve, that they're there to gather. Yashuv mitzvah avodah, maros hatzovos asher tzavu, many examples. Okay, so according to Ramban, maybe Kol Yotzei Tzava is not a military term. It means an age that people gather. Skipping about 5 lines or so. V'amar l'tzivosam shem tzvos rabos ki l'kol shevet. What's the language of their legions? If the whole idea is that people are gathering together, it shouldn't be their legions in the plural. It should be whoever's old enough to gather in the legion, the national get-together. So he says, because by tribe, each tribe was a very significant gathering. There's certainly an aspect of the counting that emphasizes the tribal origins. Lonis barely lama darshu oso lignai. Now on this language of su'ud, lifting. So Rashi brings down, it's like, you say, like, tell that fellow to pick up their head. It's sort of like you imagine people like lined up for maybe a military count or something, everyone stand straight. That's sort of like the feeling of su'ud. That seems how Rashi says it. Ramban says, I don't know why we would say it in that sort of negative way. Im b'nei shemesu b'midbar matei levi nemar, b'kodes b'nei levi l'fi shelo hayu b'chlal gzeira, v'lo b'minyan shein shaboretz nemar kein suas rosh kodas b'nei Israel. He says, if it's considered to be a response to people who died in the desert, so it's sort of like, there were people who died, so everyone has to sort of pick themselves up a little bit, be better. But the Ramban says there was another counting that doesn't seem to come after dying, that also there was a language of Sa'u. This is a very famous idea that he cites a medrash from Vayikra that Sa'u was a language of prominence. When Yosef is interpreting the dreams to the people in prison, so to one of the people he says, you're going to go back to your position. Paro will raise your head. There it clearly means you'll be important. Amra Kodesh Baruch Hu Yisrael, Nosati lachem tili rosh v'dimisi eschem li. God is saying to the Jewish people through giving this mitzvah of counting that I've given you a status of sort of an elevation of your heads, and I'm equating you or comparing you to me. One of the descriptions of God, one of the praises of God, is that you're elevated over everyone. Misnasei aflochem asisu tilui rosh. So for you, so God is misnasei l'chol rosh. So he says about the Jewish people, su'us rosh, that I want you to be elevated in this world as I'm elevated in this world. Like we say in the Halukas and Pesukei Zimra of the morning, that God raised the glory for his people. Okay, so that's just an interesting, okay. Fine. Let's go on to the next Ramban now. Tifkedu osam, say on the same pasuk. So you should count them. Inyan Pekida, Zikaron Vashgach al Davar. Tifkedu is also, we would talk about Su'u. The Ramban at least understands Su'u as being people should see that God is elevating them. But even the verb at the end of verse 3, Tifkedu, we're translated as counting, but it's also interesting. Pekida is a language of remembering and oversight. When God decides to bring a baby to Sarah, it says Hashem pakad Sarah. Doesn't mean God was counting how many babies were in Sarah's house. That's not what was going on. It means God had remembered her. By the way, pikadon is a classic terminology for when someone gives you something to watch. The Ramban says it's the same idea because it's your responsibility to look at it, to watch it, to be responsible for it. So the instruction to count the Jewish people is also with this root of pokad. So very interesting thought for the Ramban. The Ramban says that the idea of pokad here is to allude to the fact that it's supposed to be that they're supposed to do something that will make them remembered positively. What are they supposed to do that will make them be remembered positively? Give the half shekel. Half shekel is supposed to be an atonement for their souls. So count them in a way that they'll be remembered and God will oversee them in a positive way. Give them merit in the counting, and that's do it with a half shekel. Okay, and now we're going to switch gears. Continuing in this Ramban, V'amar b'David, Mispar Mifked Ha'am. Famous story during David's reign of the Jewish people, that David decided he wanted to take a census of the Jewish people, and then after David took a census, there was a terrible plague among the Jewish people. And the message that David got from heaven was it had to do with the census. So the $1 million question is, what was David's mistake? What did David do wrong? So, because the Ramban has just brought in the idea that when we count them, he's learning it from Tifkedu, but that every time we count them, it's supposed to be with the half shekel. You're not supposed to count them directly by head. The Amr David mispar mifgeda. So by David, it says the number of the remembering of the people. Says the Ramban. You see from that David knew that they were supposed to take account by giving of charity, by giving a half shekel. And then that's implied by when David decides to take the count, he uses a lashon of mifkad, which Ramban is already understanding. Mifkad means that they give a half shekel. If go to some by Parsha Shkalim, it says that you should count them by the half shekel, and there shouldn't be a plague when you count them. So it's hard to say that David forgot a pasuk in the Chumash that implies that if you don't use the half shekel, it'll be bad for them. Vim ulai David taught, and maybe everybody makes mistakes. Maybe David made a mistake. Lama lo asa Yoav shkalim. David asks Yoav, his general, to take care of this for him. So even if David made a mistake, Yoav made the same mistake. So Yoav does say something to David. Yoav says, why are we bringing this guilt upon Israel? But if the problem was the half shekel, why would Yoav just give David a speech? David says, Yoav, go count the people. So why does Yoav sit there and say, well, I don't know why you're doing a sinful thing? Yoav should say, yes, sir, and just go and count them with the half shekel. David didn't tell him not to count them with the half shekel. So Ramban says it's hard to believe that David made that mistake. And if David did make that mistake, it's also hard to believe that Yoav wouldn't have corrected it. The Ramban says David's sin was he was counting them for no good reason. It's not like David was going out to war. There's nothing substantive going on at this moment that David needs an exact count. He was proud, he was happy that he was blessed by being king over such a large nation. He wants to get the numbers. And that's what Yoav is saying to him. Yoav is saying to him, why should we put an eye in her? Why should we put a bad omen like on the numbers of Klal Yisrael? In other words, the moment you count them, whether it be that you're sort of taking pride in what it is, and that could sort of bring you on the divine microscope, whether it be that you're counting implies that it's not going to be more than this. There's an idea that counting is considered an ayin hara, it's considered bad. So Yoav says to him, let them grow many more times. Why do we need to count them? So the Ramban says what Yoav is saying is not, hey, let's count them with a half shekel. What Yoav is saying is, why do we need to count them at all? The Medrash says that every time the Jewish people were counted for a good reason, they didn't lose in number. But if they were counted for no good reason, they did lose in number. What's an example of when they were counted for a good reason? Moshe, the times of Moshe, when it had to do with separating them by their flags, figuring out how many tents are going to be in each section, and figuring out the partition of the land of Israel. For that, you need a sense of numbers. The Medrash says, what is the example where it wasn't for a good reason? We made David in days of David HaMelech. So we might continue with this Ramban tomorrow, but the idea is the Ramban is addressing another view as to what David's sin was with the counting. And we also spoke about why the age would be 20. And we also spoke about the verb choices of se'u and tifkedu.